Sorry, yeah. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the 15th August edition of the Working Party for the Planning Policy and Built Heritage. This is the first time those who remember since we've met in the chamber in person since March 20. I think we were the last meeting before lockdown. So here we are today, very pleased to see you all in person. Just some housekeeping. I'm going to sound like the Madam Chairman of the Development Committee when I say if there's a fire alarm, it's for real. Please make your way quietly to the staircases and congregate outside at either of the entrance doors, but please don't use the lift. And if I might make a plea, if you want to mute your mobile phones or switch them off, whichever you prefer, that would be very helpful. Right, so moving to the agenda. Item 1 is apologies for absence. Do we have anyone?
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Grove-Jones, Councillor Heinrich and Councillor Punchard, with Councillors Fitch-Tillett and Councillor Fredericks in attendance as substitutes.
Thank you very much for that. Do we accept all those apologies? I think we do, don't we? Yes, we do. I just want to, before I move to the next item, want to ask our two officers if they would kindly just introduce themselves.
Good morning, I'm Mark Ashwell. I'm the Planning Policy and Conservation and Design Manager, I think.
Morning, I'm Alana Hogarth. I'm Conservation and Design Officer.
Thank you very much. Item 2 on the agenda. Public questions.
No, we've not received any public questions, Chairman.
Thank you. Item 3, the minutes. We've got 2 sets, I think, for April 25th and for May 23rd to approve. So I'm just checking for accuracy. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the minutes of the 23rd of May, my name is missing from those present. I'm pretty sure I was there because it's my wife's birthday. And so borne out by the fact that on page 19, there were 12 votes unanimously resolved, and there's only 11 people on the top of the page.
You didn't take your wife out then?
Thank you, Councillor Fisher. It's much appreciated for you attending on such an auspicious event within your household. That's appreciated. Just going, I don't propose to go through every single page because I assume that members have read the minutes. Anybody else got any comments or queries about these 2 sets of minutes? Councillor Gay.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to be annoying, I'm going to say at the bottom of page 18, I thank conservation officers. There's no need for an apostrophe in that officers there. Thank you, Chairman.
Sorry, can I just ask if that was for the April or the May minutes? Page 18, fabulous. Thank you.
Right, so item 4, items of urgent business. I don't believe we.
No items of urgent
Good.
business, Chairman.
Item 5, declarations of interest, pecuniary or otherwise. Do we have any? Don't see any hands. I think I'd like to just record that I am the ward member, the study ward, and therefore the conservation area at item 7 is substantially within my ward. There are other wards covered by it, but just to make that clear. Right. 6, updates on matters previous meeting. Don't believe we have any at all, or previous meetings, should I say. So we move smartly on to item 7, which is the Glaven Valley Conservation Area Appraisal and Management Plan for 2022. Pause while we sort the technology. So I'll hand over to Alana. Whenever you're ready, Alana, thank you.
Here we go. Right. Good morning, everyone. So I'm bringing forward today the Glaven Valley Conservation Area Appraisal and Management Plan. So today, the report that we've put before you seeks approval for the Glaven Valley Conservation Area Appraisal and Management Plan to be taken forward to public consultation. As with the rest of our appraisals that we've had done up to this point, it's been produced by our appointed consultants, Purcell. And again, as with the rest of this group, funding was received to review the Glaven Valley, and we started with the settlement designations, which we have now completed. So moving on to complete this programme by finally getting the Glaven Valley moving into public consultation. And again, as with the rest of them, the main reasons for review include the very early designations and a need for sort of more robust definition and understanding, which then informs the document which can assist decision making in the planning process. I'm sure most of you are familiar with this by now, but just in case anyone isn't, I'll just quickly go through it. So a conservation area is defined as an area of special architectural or historic interest, the character or appearance of which it is desirable to preserve or enhance. So that's the sort of policy that we follow. And as part of that, we are required to formulate and publish proposals to protect and enhance the areas that we have. The document that we have produced, as with the rest of the ones that we have, are conforming to Historic England guidance. And there's a lot of benefits to reviewing our conservation areas, some of which include being able to define the special characteristics and interest, and it gives us a better understanding of why they're important to designate in the first place. And it gives us a chance as well to examine issues that threaten their significance. And also gives an opportunity to find areas where it would be good to secure enhancement. And they also provide support and guidance for decision making during the planning process, and make sure the boundaries reflect the position on the ground. And, you know, given when they're designated, it's important that the boundaries reflect any changes that have happened in the meantime. And it's also an opportunity to engage with the local community, particularly through the consultation process. The structure of the review follows the ones that we've done before, goes through what a conservation area is, what does it mean to live in a conservation area, various things like that, sort of summarises the special interest, looks at the historic development of the area, what the character is like, what sort of heritage assets we have within them, and then breaks it down into areas and it assesses those in a bit more detail. And then we'll look at vulnerabilities and opportunities, which then all of which inform the management plan and any proposals that come forward from that. Generally speaking, the recommendations will consist of things to do with repairs and materials, recommending retention of existing features, alterations, extensions, where new development would be appropriate, summary of the character of the streetscape, the public realm and the landscape, setting and views also comes into that, and consider things like traffic and parking also. And then finally, the boundary review ties all that up. So in the Glaven Valley, it's obviously slightly different to the ones we've looked at before because of its scale. It's much larger. So it's probably difficult to go into all of them now, but this map shows a bit of an overview of all of the changes that have been proposed at this stage. So I'm not going to go through all of them just now, but if anyone wants to discuss them, then please come forward after this meeting. But just to go through the major changes. So the areas in orange are areas that are proposed to be removed from the Glaven Valley. So one at the top there is the salt marshes along the coast. As it's a natural area, it has a number of natural environment designations which protect it. And so because of that, Purcell have proposed that this is removed from the Glaven Valley and it would align better with the built heritage of the village in that situation. So that area is covered by the AONB and several SSSIs, and removing it would be in accordance with best practice guidance. But the area marked as H, which is a quarry, and there's some large barns and things there, and it's proposed to be removed from the edge of the boundary there. There's some small areas around the edge of Holt, which are largely modern housing, and it's not felt that they contribute to the character of the conservation area, therefore they're proposed for removal. There's also a farm on the edge of Holt as well, which is felt that fits better into the Glaven Valley character of being an agricultural area, so that will be retained. And then we've got the areas marked as I and J, which is Stoddy, which with the previous group of conservation areas, we decided to designate as its own conservation area. Therefore, it doesn't need to sit within the Glaven Valley as well anymore. I'll just go through the sort of main additions to the boundary as well with the sort of larger areas. A, which is marked there at the top, is a large pond, which follows a section up the river as well, which is created in relation to the mill at Hempstead. So proposed to bring that into the Glaven Valley as it fits within the significance that's been defined as part of manipulating the river for milling purposes. We've got the area marked as N, which is, well, the extension there creates a buffer to the river because it's not currently within the boundary. So, but there's also a farm complex there as well, which has some historic significance in itself. And then we also have an area on the edge of Edgefield. So proposed to bring that into the Glaven Valley as well. We've got only got 3 buildings proposed for local listing at this stage within the Glaven Valley, and most of those sit outside the Edgefield conservation area. So we've got the Old White Horse, the Pytles, and Old Hall Cottage. So all of those are fairly prominent, good examples of historic buildings. So that's why we've highlighted those. So as we have done before, the public consultation will be undertaken over a period of 6 weeks. Unlike before, the public consultation will look slightly different purely because of the scale of the area. So, but it's likely to include exhibitions within certain areas, publication of the documents on the website. We'll have an invitation for public comments, and we will also have an open meeting for public to attend as well. So once representations have been considered, we will then bring the report back to working party for final adoption by cabinet. Okay, thank you.
Just want to pick up on one particular area, and that is in relation to the list of villages, which appears, I think, on page 41 of the agenda pack, page 9 of the assessment. I think we had 12 villages originally spread into 2 clumps of 6 across 2 appraisals, I think, didn't we? And there appears to be one in particular that is missing from the list. And that's the village of Sharrington. Now, whatever the designation is arrived at by Purcell, I find it surprising that there isn't an analysis in here of why Sharrington does or does not qualify. It should be to be ruled out as things currently stand. Obviously, there's a groundswell of opinion in Sharrington that they would like to see the designation boundary extended to the south and to the west to include Valley Farm, which is probably a 19th or even 18th century building. And I don't want to rerun the discussion that we had in May at this particular point, but that does come as a slight surprise. Do you have any information as to why Sharrington has been? I mean, it doesn't have its own
Well,
council.
the reason it's not within the draft appraisal at this stage is because it doesn't fall within the Glaven Valley designation. But obviously this is the vehicle, the consultation is the vehicle for us to review that if it's necessary to extend part of the boundary up to meet with the village boundary. This is the opportunity for that sort of proposal to come forward.
Yeah. So part of this process.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, it certainly has tributaries feeding into the River Glaven. So from that point of view, it's geographically within the Glaven Valley area. Fine. Any comments from the floor? Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do full-heartedly support your request for Sharrington to be included. Although it's not my ward, I am very well aware of the groundswell of opinion, and I have emails here appertaining to that fact. If we're going to make this conservation area, which is definitely required because of the value historically, amenity-wise, character-wise of the Glaven Valley, and the effect, as you just said, that tributaries run in, I think Sharrington must be included, because if it's not, it will end up being prime development land and at mercy to be cut up. And much of the character and historical relevance of Sharrington could well be destroyed. We are now well aware of other areas not far from the Glaven Valley that have been under considerable pressure to be developed. And I fully support that to have a full public consultation and a full consultation for the Glaven Valley. Sharrington must be at least included in this so that it can be discussed properly whether to or whether not to. I'm in favour of it being there, so I just thought that I would do and support your comments this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce, for that. Any other comments, Councillor Toy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm off in a slightly different direction, so I don't know if anybody had anything to add to that before I I go off in case you wanted to keep it on that subject. Okay. Firstly, thank you to personnel and officers for the report. It is incredibly detailed. It has an awful lot of information in there. And it wasn't actually unpleasant going through it sometimes when you get documents this size, but no, it was interesting. So thank you for that. I just want to make sure that we are protecting the Glaven Valley for the sake of the Glaven Valley, that we don't go off to protecting it for the vision that some people might have. So, for example, if I take, you know, wherever you read it, 51 on the pages for the PDF, or page 47, I think, of your report, but it's got a bit there that says, the landscape setting of the built heritage in the conservation area is a varied patchwork of open fields, dense woodland, lush green riverbed and expansive skies and coastline. There is a very rural feel with intimate landscapes at the riverbed and in woods contrasting with wide expansive fields and views on the valley ridges and at the coast. Wonderful postcard. You know, whilst they are not wrong, and I'm not disputing that, it felt to me like it was getting a bit, we're painting a picture of something, which is, I know what we're trying to do, and I don't know, I'm finding it difficult to express what I'm saying, but I'm just worried that we've got something here that, you know, I think it was only, when did we start on this stuff? I got the first note I hear was the Town and Country Plan Act in 32. Conservation areas were introduced by the Civic Amenities Act in 67, and the Glaven Valley was first designated in 1984. But as in this report, there's a huge history for hundreds of years before that, where it's been quite industrious in what it's produced. And so we've got things going on now, like the meandering of rivers, which is a great thing, and I'm not against it. And it does balance that slightly. On page 65, it said about restoring the rivers to natural forms, but also page 120, it does balance it that we need to keep some. But there are, you know, mills, both windmills and water mills have been part of the history. It's been a harbour. It's, you know, it's had an awful lot going on there. And I know we're protecting that in the buildings and what we're doing. So I'm not saying that the report's going in the wrong way. I'm just worried that because this stuff has come later in its history, so, you know, since 67 with the Civic Amenities Act, that we've had people that have moved here and bought this land because it used to be big landowners and people that worked the land, and people bought these lands, and we're now protecting it for their vision and not for what the historic interest of the Glaven Valley is. So hopefully in that wandering around there, I got a picture of what I felt was starting to come out of it, and I was afraid that went too far. It's clearly for local people to decide what they want. You know, those that live there to decide this is what we want to protect and what it means to us. I'm just worried that we can lose some sort of that real history, because if someone comes along with some modern technology and says, actually, we could put a water turbine in there that will generate power and grind flour, and we've kept food miles down, would we accept it now, even though that's been part of its history? So I just pose that question. I don't know that anybody's doing that. We could have modern wind turbines. I don't mean like the big towers, but are used for milling because we want to keep food miles down. We're taking it from the land. Potentially those things could happen. And if we paint this wrong picture postcard, we would be against that, when actually, historically, that's what's gone on then. So that was all I wanted to say, hopefully. Thank you.
Yes, okay, yes, thank you, Councillor Toy. I'm not sure whether you're sort of proposing limitation on the area that we're currently covered, or whether you're satisfied with the area.
If I try and clarify, because I say I did sort of wander around on that. It's not, I've got no issues with the area. I've got no issues with the report. I just want to, from my point of view, I'm just saying, you know, as a member of this committee, I'm sharing it with them, that I'm worried that we're trying to protect people's vision of it, not actually protect its history and its heritage. There's a danger we could slide towards that. We need to see what public consultation brings, but I see no need for any change. There's some great views, you know, where there's, you know, views down a driveway to a house, and they are very typical and you know, historically the big houses of the area. But it has changed over time, and what we're doing, it's protecting history, is actually a very recent thing, and we need to see it several hundred years before, and potentially how that could come round again. History does repeat itself. So hopefully that has that helped, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
you, councillor Todd. Councillor Gay, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to say I think that was really interesting insight. And I read this document with great pleasure. I think it's a very good piece of work, and there are certain bits of it that I think are outstanding, the portrait of historical development. But I didn't pick up what John has just said, because I remember going to a lecture on the trade of the Glaven Valley ports about 2 years ago, and I didn't know what very prosperous and busy and international ports they had been in the medieval era. So although on the whole I think this document is a pleasure to read, and it lays a backdrop for the preservation and enhancement of the conservation area, I think that's a very serious insight. It's very interesting that there are different views through time of the place, and we may be locked into a particular view right now. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Dixon.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think there's some good and interesting points just being brought out, but I think there's a question of balance to be struck in all of this, because as Councillor Toy says quite rightly, the history is really important here, and I think it is. He makes, I think, a valid point that we shouldn't superimpose on that. I wouldn't call them artificial. I would call them they are perhaps visions that we wouldn't naturally want to pick up on, but at the same time, history is dynamic. It is not static, and therefore history has to reflect a whole raft of periods, including some of the more latter-day stuff that we wouldn't necessarily regard as history. So I think there is a balance to be struck in this, and where you strike that balance, I think, is a matter of judgment, and probably none of us in this room would reach the same tipping point of balance. So I think it is a question of looking at that and saying, how far do we think that is? Do we think it is overwhelming that this is about visions more than history, or do we think that that balance is about right? And I don't have a judgment to offer you on that. I just simply say that that is something that probably somebody who's a little bit more equipped perhaps than I am to perhaps express a view and a judgment on that. Thank you.
Yes, you touch on a fairly important point. I mean, obviously what we have here is a procedure under planning legislation. So its primary purpose is to protect and enhance designated areas. So it's not just, as it were, an assessment of where an area is in terms of its history currently. It's actually a control in the planning process, because it's a material consideration once it's adopted. And the other thing here as well is that this was, I think, last reviewed probably about 40 years ago. So we need to take great care, because I'm not proposing that it's for another 40 years before it's reviewed again, but it's obviously a process which is going to have to stand the test of time. And I notice in the section 7.3.8 on page 128 of the agenda dealing with boundary reviews, it does talk about dilution of character and how to guard against that. That's, as it were, the ravages of time and how it affects areas, and whether they should be protected by the designation or not. And there is an acknowledgement by the consultant, by Purcell, that the boundary may have been drawn too tightly originally. So that is almost a nod to where we might want to look to expand certain areas. we've done a good job so far of sorting out some anomalies. We've designated Stoddy as a village conservation area. We've removed the landscape between Thornage and Brinton out of the village conservation area into this particular consultation process, which is obviously good. So it's indicative that in the past we've perhaps not got everything completely right, and we've had to iron out those anomalies. So we do need to consult widely with the public, as we will, and hopefully, you know, take this forward. This is basically in the process, just so that everyone knows who may be viewing from the public gallery, as it were. This is the starting gun in the process. It will come back to this working party once the consultation is finished. We will revisit it. We will probably go through it in much more detail than perhaps today. And then it will go to Cabinet for approval, and Cabinet will refer it to full council. So there are weeks and weeks of process ahead of us. And we will have a number of opportunities to analyse this and hopefully get it to be the best assessment we possibly can for this particular point in our history, as it were. Any other comments from anyone? I'm not sure when we might expect the consultation with the public to start, Alana. That might be.
We don't have a sort of firm date, but it will be sort of towards the later end of this year. Yeah, sort of there's details to be decided because of the scale.
Yeah.
It's not quite as easy as the village ones have been, but yeah, it will be this year.
Okay. Yeah. Just cover a much wider geographical area, isn't it? Right. Well, in that case, sorry, Councillor Pearce.
I'd like to come back to you, Mr. Chairman. This original discussion, and I take all the other points that were put in, was to decide whether Sharrington should or should not be included. I wasn't degenerating the report. It is a fine report, and another learned member has expressed that. But we have discussed the groundswell of opinion as regards Sharrington. It is so near as yet to be virtually within the proposed area as it stands at the moment. And I just think that we've shifted a little bit with the discussion. We need to take other points in. That Sharrington was the basic point to which I entered to support your recommendation that you yourself some time ago recommended that Sharrington should be in it. So to my mind at the moment, notwithstanding other people's learned comments, that decision has not been sorted. And I would still respectfully ask that Sharrington be included. Thank you.
I must say I would have preferred Sharrington to have been involved in the report in one way or another. We respect what Purcell have put in the report. It is their professional judgment. I was certainly left with the impression when we discussed the village consultation appraisal that we would be moving to include the hinterland to the south and west of Sharrington village, but the party is only starting as regards that.
Yes, I understand that, Mr. Chairman, and it is something that you and I agree on. As I say, I'm in receipt of emails from local people within Sharrington and around it that wanted included. As I say, I asked the question back in your observation at the start of this conversation. I still don't think it's been decided. May I ask through you Mark's comment on this, because obviously he's one of the learned people that's put an awful lot of work into this. Is it right, or could it be possibly done at this stage that Sharrington be included, or do we have to wait to the public exhibition and consultation, of which I feel pretty sure In fact, I'm 100% sure that you're going to get a groundswell in there saying that Sharrington should be included. So can we not make that decision today to at least seem to be open to the public groundswell, which you and I have said that we should move forward to get this included? I'm asking through you, see if Mark's got any comments. Thank you.
I'd rather you put the technical appraisal that you've got based on, professional opinion out to public consultation and ask people's views on it in an open way, which allows those people to express the sort of views that you've articulated, that other areas should be included or excluded following the consultation. You have an opinion, Andrew has an opinion, the public have an opinion, Purcells have appraised the area and come up with a different opinion. The nature of consultation is to test that and ask people what they think. You've clearly approached this with an open mind and said, following the public consultation, if the case is put, we can amend the boundary. You're not making a decision today whether Sharrington's in or out. You're saying, let's do a consultation to inform that later decision. That would be my preference, because we don't have the technical appraisal which justifies the inclusion of Sharrington at this stage. Now, could be wrong, Purcells could be wrong, and the public could turn around and say, actually, Sharrington, its hinterland, entirely fits the defining criteria, which John helpfully read out. He read out that script, and I thought, he said, well, that's a bit flowery, it's a bit of a postcard. That described to me Glaven Valley Conservation Area, and entirely justified the removal of the grazing marshes. The first thing that was being removed was the grazing marshes. They're clearly of a different character and don't fit the defining characteristics identified in the appraisal. If there are areas around Sharrington that do meet those defining criteria, or we've got the defining criteria wrong, the public will tell us, we can consider that, and we can deal with that in the next stage. So I would go out to consultation. We're focused on Sharrington. What if Edgefield or any of the other settlements want to raise similar issues? It'd be better to deal with that sort of comprehensively following proper consultation when you've got the views in front of you to consider. So I wouldn't have any reservations at this stage about putting out what I think is a good quality report on the basis that we'll listen to what people say, and if it needs amending, we'll amend it.
Thank you, Mark. As I said to you, I wasn't degenerating the report. I am well aware of the work, the commitment, and the ecological, historical, and economic values that have been put into it. I'm just very concerned that as a working party, putting a lot of effort into proposed development and protection, being equally balanced, that Sharrington should at least be minuted today that there is special interest if you're not going to put it on there at the moment. Because I then got to ask another question, Mr. Chairman. What happens if the public concern in Sharrington is such that it's an overwhelming groundswell that they be included, that Sharrington is included, then what do we do?
Well, it will come back to you, and you will have in front of you the argument for inclusion and why that groundswell of opinion. If the groundswell of opinion is Sharrington should be included because we're fearful of large housing estates being built in the village, that is not a good reason for including the area as a conservation area. The public will have to express their concerns in a way which relates back to the reasons for designation, that this is a special area which requires preservation or enhancement, having regard to its defining characteristics, not let's designate this because we're concerned that Beazer Homes are going to build 50 houses in this field. That is not a good reason for designation at all. It's a bit analogous to a planning application. You wouldn't refuse a planning application on the basis of a next door neighbour who'd expressed some concerns to you before the planning application had even been submitted. The planning application would come in, you would consult on it, you would listen to those neighbours' concerns, and then you would make an informed decision with that information in front of you. And I think this is a similar sort of process. Let's see what people have got to say properly through written submissions, and then make a decision. I think the debate has illustrated that there's a bit of a wind behind including Sharrington, and that will appear in the minutes of the discussion, I'm sure. and address your concerns, that and you can go back to the public and you can say, yeah, members were alive to this, it was debated, I have a view on it, but I want to wait until the results of the consultation before I make my mind up.
Thank you for that, Mark. As I say, it isn't my ward, but obviously I'm well aware of what a lot of the groundswell is. And I think today, I would just like Sharrington, or our concern, or the public's concern, not our concern, the public's concern that it be included is minuted, because when we go out to the public consultation, I'm 100% sure actually there's going to be a groundswell to have Sharrington included. And I just want that report, like everybody else, to be fully comprehensive, and everything should be open to an addition to include what the public, as you've just rightly said, feel is right in their case. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Pearce. Yeah, I think what I would like minuting, certainly from the chair, is that we're disappointed that Sharrington wasn't referred to in the report at this particular stage, whether it's supported for inclusion or not by the consultants. I think it's just disappointing that there wasn't a reference to Sharrington. It's almost as though Brinton is being included with Sharrington in the thinking of the consultants, rather than considering them individually, is almost the impression that I'm getting. Just to assist members, if we cast our mind back to May, there was a debate about a particular parcel of land in Sharrington, to the south of Bale Road. Actually, I think it was designated on the plan as parcel E, and there was a lot of debate about it, as we recall. And originally, that area was included in the Purcell consultant report for the village conservation area. And the landowner of the area in question submitted a response, and it was then removed by the consultants in reply to that submission. It then came before us to consider whether that was a valid request and whether it should be reinstated or not. And we decided that it should be reinstated. So we have a demonstration there that this is a fluid consultation, and during the course of the weeks following the public consultation, we will have an opportunity to consider all the submissions. There may well be submissions from other areas wanting inclusion or exclusion, as the case may be, and we will have an opportunity to look at it further. But it does demonstrate that there is the possibility that our conservation and design team, will respond to public making requests and will make adjustments.
Well, thank you for that, Mr. Chairman. I'll come back to what you said just now. We should minute the fact that we are disappointed that Sharrington are not in there. That gives a lot of credence, and also it shows the public that we are an open-minded committee in order, to ensure that the job is right. Now, I know that there are people watching today on Zoom in Sharrington, and I'm not saying they're going to be whooping with delight, but the fact is that we mentioned it this morning, and I think they will take the cudgels and come forward to the public consultation, which may well force us to have a rethink, which I believe in their belief is the right way to go. So I think we could and should have something minuted today with Sharrington and our disappointment, even if it's only you and I. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think Mark's made a very sensible point. If Councillor Pearce has already received interest from Sharrington, then I'm sure those people will come forward. That's what consultations are for. This is adjacent to my ward. There are two villages. There's Gunthorpe and Bale. Have the same characteristics as Gleben Valley, and there is no interest there. They're quite happy with the consultation. But I'm sure if people there wanted to raise it, they would. Isn't that the nature of consultation? I think it will be covered in the minutes. if people are watching, they'll come forward. So I think I'd leave it at that. Thank you.
Right, councillor Fitch-Tillett.
Thank you. I think actually it's perfectly clear that we need to go forward to public consultation. I'm quite happy to propose that we accept the 2 recommendations. However, there's just a couple of things I'd like to raise, which is something that you said, Mr. Chairman. Glaven Valley, right? That includes any, in my mind, any sort of watercourse that rises and feeds the River Glaven. Now then, you pointed out that there are watercourses in Sharrington that do just that. Presumably, and I'm not that good on all the watercourses outside the Broads area at the moment, but presumably there are other villages that have watercourses that feed into the River Glaven that we have also admitted. Are we opening a can of worms? And I just leave you to think about that, but I could still uphold my proposition to accept.
Yeah, okay, thank you, councillor Fitch-Tillett. Councillor Gay.
Thank you, Chairman. May I second councillor Fitch-Tillett's proposition?
So just summarising what we've debated this morning is that we note a certain omission as we've discussed in relation to one particular area, but we need to start the process. We're satisfied with the standard of the reporting from Purcell, and I think therefore we need to move to the recommendation. I have councillor Fitch-Tillett proposing. I think that's right, isn't it? Councillor Gay seconding. The recommendations are, just for the benefit of everyone, that the draft appraisal as set out within the body of this report be recommended to Cabinet for approval for public consultation. And secondly, that following consultation, the amended appraisal, I stress amended appraisal, be brought back to the working party, this working party, for consideration and subsequent adoption by Cabinet and ultimately by full council. So I think I will propose the vote. Are we ready to make a note of? You don't need a recorded vote. Just by show of hands. So please raise your hands if you are supporting this these recommendations, these 2 recommendations. I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that.
Before we
So-
move on, Mr. Chairman, can it be cleared that we can minute certain members' disappointment at the loss of Sharrington to this report? Because that was one of the things that you suggested.
Yes, no, it will be minuted, councillor Pearce, it will be minuted. Right, 8, any business and institution. The chairman has previously determined under item 4, we have none. We have no requirement to exclude the press and the public, or under item 10 to consider any exempt matters arising from public business, or under 11, chairman's discretionary business. So I think that said, we could call the meeting to a close at 10:49, and I will allow you to go and enjoy the fresh